your embrace, for I am yours. You are. Whoa. Huh? There's a song you want to sing?
Did they make it home safely?
Oh yeah, I love that song.
I love it. I wish is it in? Is it in?
That's not in any of the books, no ma'am, but I could. I bought the PowerPoint to it at one point. I've got it somewhere.
We need to sing that song.
We can do it tonight as the closing one. I can play it even on. I might even have a version that's got the notes.
I don't think we can tonight.
Why's that? If we have some like help,
Yeah.
you know,
What's that? Oh, the audio?
yeah, in need.
Uh-huh.
That's right. I love that song.
It's very good. Would you hear? They didn't have to drive. But did they, what did they have?
You heard. Jim Hollingsworth. That doesn't. I don't know. Jim Hollingsworth. My in-laws might. How old a fellow is he? My in-laws are in their 70s, so.
Mid-70s.
Okay.
I was curious.
Did he worship possibly at university there in Gainesville?
Way back.
Oh, really, today?
I bet my in-laws might. He bet you said he passed away today.
But what should he do?
Everybody, thanks for watching this Bible Project video.
The Bible's an important book.
And you don't know who they are.
You mean your name?
You should stay on the back.
Man, I was gonna lock her out. Kick her out. Put her out. Put her out. We're all 90 million degree weather. Well, that's because.
I'm Jessica. Yes, thank you.
I wasn't rushing.
We sit in LC.
We saw it last
Really, where do we sit that's not so it's cute? There's not this, it's like, maybe yes. I see what he's saying. Yeah, you broke the teachers. Please. Yes. I'll let you either go to the classroom or I can He is he is the fire. I'm pretty sure this is.
Did you get your results back yet?
It's already on all.
That's a long wait to grade a test.
They have to calculate the curve.
You're gonna get 100. I mean, so you are the curve.
You are the curve. With having, being the one person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brandon, have you ever heard the song Oceans? Are you familiar with that song at all? Y'all ever heard that song?
I can sing it beautifully.
Do you know it for real, or are you just totally messing around? But you know it? Okay. Would you sing it along with other people singing it?
Yeah.
Did you have a good day? Pretty good. Who had time to do their homework and watch the 5-minute video?
You gotta give me more to tell you.
I know, it's bad. It's bad. Well, we're gonna watch it because it only takes 5 minutes. We have time to watch it tonight. I do need to add y'all. All I really need is the spelling of names and 2 cell phone numbers. That's it. That's it. All I need. Write it on a piece of paper.
Well, we have work on
So y'all still do have that.
Ma'am. Yeah, you're past time. Where'd your heifer go? Your little heifer. The actual heifer.
Her and Brooke took Taylor to out there.
Are they going to teach her in class? Oh, hey, your daughter's teaching Bible class. Hey, would it be safer for them to stay in here? Or are they worried about being too loud? Okay. I don't know. I mean, Addison is so loud. That girl screams all the time. Addison is the loudest. That child, whew, can't ever get her to be quiet. Right? She's like her meemaw? You ain't kidding. All right. Let's see. Mr. Bill, headachy. How was he when you left the house?
He's feeling a lot better this evening.
He said it's kind of coming and going with headache. Is it all right if we start? Is it all right with you? Are you good? I'm talking to you. You won't fight right here. It's on the camera. In front of the whole world. Anybody, Big Bill's home. He's got a headache. Hoping that's all that it is, but just be mindful of him. Anything else we want to make mention of before we get rolling? Friday. Yep, we were talking about that. Be safe. He's going to the land of the heathens. We already know where he's. I know exactly where he's going. He ain't gonna have time to see William. He told me his schedule. He ain't gonna have time to come up for air. Tell him to be warming up the slot machine. Right? So just feed a few quarters before you get there. That's all right.
I'll introduce you to some girls.
Oh, brother. That's the last thing Brandon needs. That's the last thing William needs. Run, young men, run. Can I get an amen from the married men? Yeah. Do we want to switch our topic to marital counseling tonight? Let's just. I'm not even going to teach. I'm just going to facilitate the argument. Discussion. I want women on this side and men on this side. And we'll have Nerf swords and pool noodles and let y'all square off and we'll solve some marital problems. That sound good? Or create some. We can go either way. Create problems to be solved later. So be mindful of your travel. Be mindful of Bill. Anybody else we need to be mindful of? Comes to mind. Miss Mary's getting treatments again. She's there every day this week, right, Leash? Monday through Friday. So be mindful of her. She's kind of kids taking turns running her back and forth. For several. That's what I thought. It's 5 days a week for multiple weeks for her. So that ain't no fun. So be mindful of that. All right. I'm going to let these ladies come in and then grandkids. This weekend? Which ones? Fort Lauderdale. How many hour drive is that?
6
Woo, one way?
hours.
Good night. I don't know who to pray for. More for your safety or for your wife's sanity for having to be in the car with you 6 hours. It's hard. That's a burden.
I'm easy.
Yeah.
Well, we're not-
I got the pool noodles in the back. Like if we need to bring them out before we have this conversation, we can.
You just won't expect one way.
Yeah, that's right. How are y'all? Boys clear? Never got anything? Good. Did they get to go back yet? Okay. I don't know. Did William get to go back? I guess we know if everybody got to go back. Good. All right. My Tyler, do you mind kicking us off with a word of prayer?
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing us to be able to come here and learn more about you and to do with everyone that we mentioned, everyone we failed to mention. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen. All right, I'm going to play the video to get us rolling for those that didn't have a chance to watch it, and then we're gonna talk about it. That's what our topic will be tonight. I don't have that light on, so we're good. It doesn't take 5 minutes, so it won't be long.
But it's really long. Yeah, it's a collection of many books written over a long period of time, but altogether they tell one unified story.
So, what's the story of the Bible?
Well, it begins by introducing us to a beautiful mind, the author of all reality, a being called God. And he has the power to take the dark chaos of the uncreated world and bring about order and beauty and a garden full of life.
And to crown this accomplishment, God appoints these creatures called humanity,
Or in Hebrew, Adam,
and they're made as God's image.
which means that they're commissioned to rule this beautiful world on God's behalf by harnessing all of its potential and creating even more beauty and order.
This is a story about humans using their power to do meaningful, life-giving work. But the question is, how?
Yeah, humanity now faces a choice that's represented by a fruit tree. So humans could partner with God and find freedom by trusting in his knowledge of good and evil.
Or
They could seize power and define good and evil on their own, which, God warns, will kill them.
and they hear the voice of a dark, mysterious creature that tells them the choice is simple. Take the fruit. It'll give you power and freedom to rule the world on your own terms.
And so they seize this knowledge, and as a result, they become suspicious and self-protective. It leads to fractured relationships, violent power grabs, and ultimately a whole civilization, Babylon, that has redefined evil as good. And so God scatters this corrupted human project.
And here the story of the Bible takes an important turn. We zoom into the story of a man and a woman who come out of Babylon, Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah, God promises that from them will come a new people, a nation that has another chance to make the right choice. And if they succeed, it will open up this new way forward for the rest of humanity.
And this is why the rest of the Bible story is about this family.
And it does not go well. Despite God's personal guidance, Abraham's family gives in to that same temptation to redefine good and evil on their own terms, apart from God.
Even when their best people were in charge, rulers who loved God's guidance and had divine wisdom, even they gave in.
And so Israel was warned by their own prophets that these choices would lead them back to Babylon, this time as conquered captives living in exile, and that's exactly what happened.
So even with God's personal guidance, Israel fails. Who can succeed?
Well, the prophet said that the story wasn't over. God's going to send a new leader to Israel to cover for their failures and to transform the people's hearts and minds so that they can make the right choice.
And so the part of the Bible called the Old Testament ends, and these promises are left hanging.
And then the biblical story continues into the New Testament. We're introduced to a man who comes from the line of Israel's kings, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said that he was bringing all these promises to their completion.
He confronted that dark, mysterious evil that all humanity is given into and resisted its power.
And then he announced that God had arrived to rule the world through himself. Jesus taught about God's definition of good and evil, and he said that real power is serving others. According to Jesus, it's people who love the poor and even love their enemies. These are the kinds of people who actually rule the world.
And that's confusing, but also really beautiful.
And so is the claim that the story goes on to make about Jesus, that he is God become human. to be for Israel and for all humanity what we could never be for ourselves. He came to take the consequences of our evil into himself, and his sacrificial love proved more powerful than evil, than even death itself.
So now humanity is presented with a new choice.
Represented by a new tree.
Stick with the old way of being human, or venture into this new way.
And in the story, those who choose the way of Jesus find themselves energized by God's own power. People who know that they are loved and forgiven by God can become people who love and forgive others in return.
The Jesus movement quickly spread throughout the world, forming these new communities of people who follow the way of Jesus.
But they faced problems. There was persecution from the outside by people in power, and inside there was confusion, even compromise.
Yeah, because following Jesus is really hard.
And so the movement's leaders, called apostles, they wrote letters to comfort and to challenge these communities to stay faithful to the difficult way of Jesus.
And they're called to hope for the day when Jesus will come and change everything.
And so the Bible ends by pointing to the future day when all wrongs are made right, when evil is eradicated, heaven and earth are united, and humanity can rule the world together in the love and power of God.
Okay, so that's the story of the Bible, and it brings all of these books together.
But what's interesting is that each book can...
We don't need after that because it's introducing the next one. Do y'all find these videos helpful? I've shown a few of them that try to either tell the overview of Isaiah. We did it a few times where they kind of do the cartoons, that kind of we do whatever. Do these help summarize or kind of give you a visual picture?
Yeah, mine went to a different video, 40 minutes.
40 minutes.
What? Really? That's not, y'all didn't get that link either?
Mine was a dude in front of a whiteboard talking for 40 minutes.
On what topic?
Same idea, but.
For 40 minutes?
For 40 minutes. Well, at my house, about 12, because I said.
No. Look, if you ever get something sent by me that's longer than 5 or 10 minutes, just know it's the wrong. Do you think I have enough attention span to watch something that long, let alone encourage that? Come on. No. So, all right. Well, I apologize. I don't know how that's possible because I got that one. Y'all got the right one? Did you? Which one did you get? I don't have any idea what happens. There ain't no telling. So, I want to talk tonight about the one story of the Bible. And why is that even important? And I've got applications that we'll go into a little bit more, but I think, I'm just going to put it out there, I think it's very important that we see and we understand, yes, there's books of the Bible, yes, there's epistles and there's chapters, there's Old and New Testament, but it's one God, one story that's headed to one destination. I think it's really important that we see that. Even before we get into any of it, can you think of any reasons possibly why that would be important? That we see it as one big story, or any helpful things that come out of that? I know you've had zero time to prepare. I just want you thinking about that. I want you to think about that. I'll give you a second. If not,
It's so we don't get bogged down in the weeds.
I think that can happen big time. Sure,
But we got to keep in mind it's an art.
it is. To see the continuity of God through all of it, Kevin?
It's a complete story.
Yes.
There's nothing missing, there's a beginning, the content in the middle, and there's an end, and, it doesn't have any holes in it.
And what's even more fascinating and solidifying of the testimony that this is from God and not man is the multiple authors over multiple centuries, and the story matches. There's harmony. And something else, and I was listening, I love the Bible Project guys, man. They've got phenomenal material. If you're driving long distance or you're flying, whatever it needs, I can recommend multiple of their series that they do. Their podcast is phenomenal. There are other cultures had prophets, but there's no culture that had like a prophet Isaiah with a manuscript that they could reference. The sheer volume, there is a huge emphasis in Christianity, in Judaism on the text, is there not? The scrolls, the oral record. There is a story to be told, not hodgepodge, not man's orders. It's narrative. There's not another culture or religion that even comes close to being driven by a text, a set of teachings. The enormous volume of manuscripts that we have is that's what lends credibility to this is of God and not of man. And then you combine all these guys writing at different times, and obviously we believe in the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Man can't do that. Man can't do that. So let's talk about the overview of, let's talk about the story. Chapters 1 and 2 of the Bible. What do we have? We've got creation. Was it interesting to know that the Hebrew word for man or humanity is Adam, basically? Adam. And woman is taken out of him. It's just interesting. And their job is to do what? What was God's original purpose for Adam and Eve? What if they wouldn't have blown it in the next chapter? What was the plan? Okay. Now, and I want to dig a little deeper on that. Just sitting around on a hammock eating bonbons in the garden, or what? Of what?
Caretaking, if they named the animals. I mean, it was theirs to make blossom.
Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, reign. It's, maybe we resist whatever, but did God give Adam a dominion, a area, a region to rule, and in partnership with God, rule and reign together, to subdue the animals, to work the earth and work the field and work the garden, whatever, and to have that rule and dominion. That was the plan, for God and man to work together in unison, in beauty and harmony and perfection. In chapter 3, the relationship gets broken. The business partnership goes wrong. We've got a job to rule the world, and man blows it. And what happens is he can't do the job right, or he just refuses to. Did you like the illustration? And it's kind of, again, summaries are not thorough, right? That's the nature of a summary. The choice of the tree and the two paths. What is the choice of the tree? And God's given the command, don't eat of it. The day you eat of it, you'll surely die. What does Satan sell to them about that tree? And why they should eat? That was the theme of the video. It's power. And what specific? Okay, and it changes the lie that, hey, yeah, you won't surely die. But what is it that's tempting about, what were they going to get from eating that fruit, Mr. Billy? What do you think?
Their eyes were going to open.
Okay.
And they would be just like God. They know everything.
Did you catch that? Yeah, we understand we're not big G God, but what do we often strive to be? Little G gods. We want to seize the power. We can work with God in harmony and perfection and have access to all his power he wants to give us. The temptation we all face is, I want to be God. I want to seize power. I want to define, this was part of the video as well, I want to define good and evil. I want to define right and wrong. That doesn't change for humanity ever. That's that we're all there. So you've got creation, you've got humanity, you've got rebellion, and then there is a fallout. And that is the cosmic background of the entire story. Something else. We were created in God's image. What do you think that means? And there's another thing about God's breath is breathed into Adam to give him that life. What does that mean that we've been created in God's image, you think?
The choice of right and wrong, knowing.
I think that's a part of the answer. How is it that we're different than animals?
We got a memory.
We've got a memory.
And a conscience to do with it. You feel hurt and pain of somebody else.
Okay. Emotions. You mentioned earlier on the choice, the power to choose right and wrong as well. We have a mind created like his. What else do you think it means to be? Is there a morality that comes with that? At least the choice to be moral? To have character, to be honorable. Is that part of being created in his image? Just so you know, when we blow it, one of the things that gets repeated a lot about Jesus when he finally comes is help us be conformed to his image again. The image that we had, that we lost, The whole purpose of sending Jesus is him to inspire us to fulfill the image in which we were created.
You know, the man that had lived indefinitely, if they had faith.
I think absolutely. Now we know, because we know the Bible, we know how when did God come up with the plan of Jesus? I'm gonna pick on that one. I'm gonna say not, that's close but not quite there. Alicia?
So, making the statement we were made in his image, meaning like, if we go from when we were born, like being without sin?
No, I'm just saying more just the mind, the intellect, the emotion, the ability and to reign and rule, which is the job that we're given. Nothing else is like that.
We have a soul. We are spiritual beings. We have a physical body now, but we live forever.
Did y'all catch that? Did you everybody hear that? The spirit and soul part. We are eternal. We are, like God, we are eternal. There's a part of us that never dies. That's all I think.
That would be the part that when God created us, to give us that.
That's right.
And that's so that we would live with him forever. What we're going to.
We're going to.
We don't mess up.
The whole story is what we lost, God's plan to regain it. And then here's the thing. We should not skip from here straight to Jesus in the New Testament, because does God's history work? There would be so much lost if we went straight from Genesis 3 to Matthew 1. There is a huge body of knowledge and God interacting with man that we need, that teaches about us, that teaches about God, teaches about his character, his nature, all of the story of Jesus that we're tracing in Sunday morning, that line of Jesus through those characters. We need all of that to appreciate who he is and what he is, and it all points to him. So let's go back to like our story. So we've got 1 and 2, God's mind, beautiful mind, created in his image. We blow it, and then what happens with the first children? Because they choose to seize their own power, what happens with the first 2 children? They collide. What's their names? You remember? Cain and Abel. Man, I was going to pick on somebody over here. Cain and Abel. What happens with Cain and Abel, Miss Carol? And said we don't get all the details of why sacrifice or whatever, but God even tries to warn him about, you need to get control of yourself, and then he goes and he murders his brother. That's the first story. And it, just so you know, not long after that, like 5, 6, and 7, is the story of a guy in a boat. What story is that? Noah. What's the whole reason he has to build the boat? Genesis 6. Huh? To save a remnant, because what? Continually. Man's thoughts were on evil continually. God repented that he made man. Now, I think there's some literary devices with that, but it's that bad that I've got to wipe them all out and start all over with Noah. And not long after they get off the boat, all the way up to Genesis chapter 11. I'm just going to tell you, the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis, I don't believe can be studied too much. We need to study them as much as we study the 4 Gospels, because they set the stage for all of human history and help us understand what it's all about. So what happens in chapter 11? You get a group of mankind together, and what are we going to do? We're going to build something. What are we building? The tower. To what? You remember what it said? We're going to build it all the way up to heavens to see God, whatever, and that's where they get scattered. And this is one of the things that just drew me to that just kind of one of them little nuggets, like one of them little hyperlinks to show you that those stories connected. The Tower of Babel is where God scatters his creation, and the Old Testament ends with them being warning that if they don't stay faithful, where are they headed to? Babel is short for Babylon. And the Old Testament is going to end with, if y'all don't stay faithful to God, the prophet's screaming, begging them to be faithful. And if you don't, guess where you're headed? Back to Babylon. Not to build a tower, but to be slaves and in captivity for multiple years. Fascinating, right? The circular nature of, and one of the things that I listened to their podcast that kind of went along with this, is they said the entire story of Israel is not just a retelling of the fall of man in Genesis 3. It is a picture of that, but it's a worse picture. They said it intensifies what Adam and Eve blowing it by choosing what they choose in the garden is bad. The entire story of Israel is them making that same choice over and over and over again. And they wind up right back kind of where it all started. I feel like that's fascinating. Well, in chapter 12, the story takes a big turn. Who's going to be the character of Genesis 12? By the way, this all ties into the trivia that we did last week. Abram, who's going to become, going to be renamed to, he goes from exalted one to father of a multitude, Abraham. And so we zoom into this one man, Abraham and Sarah. They're giving a divine blessing. In fact, the word blessing is used like 5 times in that text, over and over and over. It's a second chance to rule well, and all nations will be blessed through you. And as they say in the video, how does the story go? Not well. Do Abraham and Sarah mess up? Couple different times, or 3 different times. The lying about who she actually is, the circumventing God's plan, just not understanding it. The story of Israel is filled with the failure of people. The job given to humans is a blessing. To fill the earth is a blessing. To rule the earth is a blessing. And God's whole message is, I want to do this with you, and I want to do it through you. And he says to Abraham, after all the nations have blown it, I'm renewing the job through you. You're going to get us back. This blessing points us back to chapter 1. God says, I'm going to take one family. I'm going to bless all humanity through you, through your great, 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 great grandson, and probably a few other greats in there, of Jesus. That was Bill. Then where we transition is the story of Israel. Just name some of Abraham's kids and descendants. Who's some of the ones that come to mind? You got Isaac. Ishmael is, and I'm really glad you mentioned Ishmael, because that is a son of Abraham. And that's what the problems we're facing in the world today goes back to all of this. History has tentacles that can spread way out. Who's some of the other descendants? Who comes after Isaac? Who's the twins? Jacob and Esau's rivalry, mom's involvement in that rivalry, them not getting out. And then Jacob's kids, what happens with Jacob's kids? What's the story of the 12? How does that all kick off? Say it again.
They were so jealous of their younger brother, they couldn't get him.
They came up with a plan to kill their little brother and eventually end up selling him off. Even in like video talks about, even when you have the best of their leaders, like a David, does David blow it? And David's a guy after God's own. He's the only king that unifies the kingdom. Do you know that? It's divided not long right after him, whatever. He's the one that kind of sets the stage. And even with all of his psalms and his heart for God, he blows it big time and suffers consequences throughout the rest of his reign, and just kind of goes downhill from there. And so again, I'm kind of back to Israel being warned over and over. Here's the illustration I want to give you. It's kind of a picture of Israel. So imagine a shop teacher. I'm just kind of going there because one of my favorite teachers in middle school is when we actually got to work with like power saws. We were like every there's like groups of 4 of us that had like a little stand. And you had to roof like a 4x4 section. You had to lay down the paper and learn how to do that part. You had to wire like the electrical outlet, and you kind of got to learn to do all that stuff. And then there was a light bulb that had to come on. And kind of your test was if water could pour down. And then when you plugged something in. But just that guy was phenomenal, right? So imagine so he's got a class full of 30 students and every one of them fails miserably, right? Fails miserably. And so what he does is he starts to train one student to be like his mentor, like an apprenticeship. And he just works and pours all of his effort and energy into this one student. They get so close. There is a bond that's formed. And now it comes time for that kid to take the test. And he fails it on purpose. It's not that he doesn't show up. It's not that he doesn't know it. He fails it on purpose. He chooses to. That's kind of a summary, a picture of Israel, of all of these extra measures of grace. And all, you are the ones that had the prophets, the New Testament. You had every advantage over all of humanity, and they still found ways to twist God's words, to doubt his power, and rebel against him, even though they were repeatedly warned over and over. And so you finish the Old Testament, and you think chapter 3 is bad. You think of chapter 3, the fall of Adam and Eve, is bad. By the time you get to chapter 503, as you get to the end of the Old Testament, it's worse. We need help. We need help. And that was the prophet's message. You need help. And God is sending you help. There is a divine invasion coming. A king, a leader, the ideal human who's so close to God and fused with God's nature itself, and he's going to bring a recreation, a renewal to the human heart and the human mind. Is that not the promise mentioned multiple times in Ezekiel? A new heart and a new spirit, and my spirit I'll give to you. And so the end of the Old Testament is we're waiting for that guy. And who shows up in the New Testament? There's actually, you could go a little bit more detail. Who shows up first? John the Baptist does. And what's he doing? Announcing, hey guys, remember what we've been waiting for? Get ready. It's almost here. It's like goosebumpy, like 400 years of waiting. And now John the Baptist gets these gifts and this power. And even the Pharisees recognize, like, nobody wants to say nothing bad about John because everybody recognized God's working through that guy. And his job is he's almost here. Get ready. And Jesus comes onto the scene. God comes in human flesh, and his claim is, I'm going to fulfill everything that the prophets were telling you about. I'm going to give you what this was all about. I love the part of the video about he confronts the same evil that all of humanity has been confronted with and wins. When does that happen? You could say, there's multiple answers, but when does that happen first? Where that same evil spirit, that's Satan basically, when is it that he, tries and Jesus prevails? When does that happen first? Remember? Yes, ma'am. That's Matthew 4, I believe, and Luke 4. It's where he goes up on the mount, and Jesus arrives in a weakened state. What's he been doing, and for how long? He's been fasting 40 days and 40 nights, and the first temptation was food. Hey, just turn these stones into bread. You can do this. Man shall not live by bread alone. What's the next thing he tempts them with? You remember? Luke, and just so you know, Luke and Matthew do not follow the same order. Just so there's not, I won't count you off for getting them out of order because Matthew and Luke don't even get the order. What's the next one, Holly? If you'll basically, and not to put the God to your test, but he'll save you. He's given his archangels charge of you. Just throw yourself off and basically prove that God will save you. And then I think the climactic one is where he takes them up on top and says what? Now, why is that such a temptation? This is a big deal. And as we think, because if you think about it, he's already king. Isn't Jesus king already? Psalm 2 says the scepter is not going to ever leave you. You're going to rule and crush and whatever. He's already a ruler. What's the temptation of, if you'll just bow down to me, I'll give you all this? He was going to get it anyway. But what did he have to go through first? It's the temptation of, you don't have to do it this way. And that, to me, just full cycle. When Peter, with good intentions, is saying, Lord, I'm never going to let that happen. You don't have to die. I'll pick up a sword and I'll fight. Lord, there's no way you have to die. And what does Jesus tell him? Get behind me. It's that same temptation of, hey, Jesus, you don't have to go to the cross. So get behind me, because that's not the plan. He's got his face set there. So Satan basically tempts Jesus to seize power by taking the fruit as well. It's the same temptation, and Jesus wins. Jesus prevails. He overcomes. He doesn't give in.
Now, I know we're just talking semantics.
We are.
But I think it's important to remember that that's not the only time Jesus was tempted.
Not at all. Amen. Amen.
I believe
It's not like, in fact, that same text says he departed only to return again. The text, I believe, ends that way. It's not like, oh, he had one temptation, he conquered, and then, no.
I think he was tempted from the age of accountability to when he died on the cross.
Lust of the flesh, boastful pride of life. I think Jesus was tempted. The Hebrew writer says, in all points as are we. And it wasn't just in the garden. It wasn't just on the mountain. He was humanity. So you're exactly right. I think that is an important, it wasn't just he had to pass the test once, because we don't have to pass. Do we have to pass it more than once? Hey, just pass it till you get baptized and you're good. And Satan never shows up again after that, right?
I mean, he had to, because he was human.
That's right.
He
That's
had to go through just what we go through, so that he could be pure and holy. And at judgment day, he'd stand there and says, look, I went through it too.
That's right. And that's more inspiring for me to follow a guy who he's not above us. So right after his temptation and him passing that test, he begins his teaching, the kingdom teaching. And we've been studying a little bit before COVID happened and I got sick and went off to camp, whatever. We've kind of been on Wednesday nights in the Sermon on the Mount. Is that pretty standard, normal, kind of very normal for world people, what the Sermon on the Mount is? About how you're supposed to interact with people, and it's pretty standard mankind wisdom.
I think that's the angle that the idiot present-day politicians would say, in getting you to pick him to be your leader.
If you're thinking of power and seizing power, how is the Sermon on the Mount a little bit foreign to that? Hey, if a guy slaps you on one cheek, Billy, what are you supposed to do? Not hit him back? If a guy asks you to go to 1 mile, what are you supposed to do? Kevin, what if he asks you for your shirt? And your coat too. And deny yourself. And blessed are the meek. And blessed are the humble. And blessed are the poor in spirit. And it's upside down town of how we're supposed to live and conduct ourselves in this kingdom. But that is, and I love it, is that living comes with a power from God that we're given. And not to get up, and they don't really touch in the video, but outside of Jesus, the people that have had the most influence for good in our world and all of human history are people who have lived, whether they were Christians or not, who have lived the kingdom principles of the Sermon on the Mount. People like Gandhi, people like Mother Teresa, people like Martin Luther King, and various people who chose the path of humility rather than power and domination and being first. Kind of modern day examples. What's not in mind with his kingdom teaching is God setting up another kingdom state, right? Are we getting another King David to sit on a literal throne? Hebrew writer, it's copies of the true kingdom and throne is in heaven. My kingdom is not of this world, Jesus said. Otherwise, they would fight. They would pick up sword, but that's not the kingdom. But the kingdom is a grouping of people. And the gospel is announcing a new king. Jesus acted like a royal figure and even accepted worship and called on people to be loyal and faithful to him. And yet what's interesting is that even though they've got a king and they are a kingdom, they are not a military or political threat to any nation they've ever been a part of. But it's fascinating, within a couple centuries' time of Jesus, Rome has taken notice of who these people are. And even though Jesus taught, render unto Caesar and pray for the king and be good citizens as far as you can, Rome feels threatened by them, and I think through the work of Satan tries to attack them that leads to that part of history. Jesus comes and defines what is good and shows us the proper way to exert power. How does Jesus, what is the power to the Sermon on the Mount principles? I guess I'll ask that as a question. Or in what way does Jesus show a different kind of power? What is the power of living humble or righteous or godly? What do you think, Brando?
To show power to refrain from temptation and to refrain from being prideful, boastful when you have the opportunities.
Restraint is kind of a word that came to my mind as you were saying that. Power to resist, kind of doing some of that. What else would you think about on that line? How does that? Think about a passage where about like being kind to your neighbor is like heaping coals of fire on their head. How does that work? Why does that work? How is that a power? Being nice and kind and not responding in kind to other people. How does that give you power over them?
It convicts them.
I mean, it can. We're speaking but it really has a. Tyler, how you can say that? Okay, you're more possibly under control than they are because you're not selfishly asserting yourself and trying to exert dominance in some ways. It has a power to disarm them.
People don't know what to do with that.
That's exactly right. It's not. The normal is to be the alpha. The normal is and we don't even see it as a negative trait of selfishness. So it's just self-preservation. It's natural in chaos. Like if we're running out of antibiotics, then we're probably going to have a storming of the pharmacies to get what you can in the name of self-preservation. That's just when things are bad, get what you can get, save yourself. Look at toilet paper and water. We think that we are so sophisticated in our modern day culture. We will turn to savages and primates in no time as soon as a hot commodity runs out. Let gas run out and look at what people turn into. Look at the anger. Let food run out. Did y'all read about the cruise ship that kind of got stranded and started running out of food and all they had was like bread and onions and how it got like primal and savage? It took 3 days. 3 days. True power is power under control. Unselfish usage of power. Laying down your life for the enemy. That is foolish. Like you're kind of pointing out, let's just imagine that the United States foreign policy was the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount. How long are we going to last as a nation and a government? And so we see the logic of that and we say, well, then how in the world can I possibly apply that? If a guy's coming after me, you're telling me I'm supposed to just let him win? I mean, we can get into the hemming and hawing of I do believe we have a right to protect ourselves. I don't think that means I have to just fall over whatever. But when it comes to yielding in traffic, or it comes to yielding in the workplace, it's tough. It is not easy. But you get it. The natural tendency is to lie, cheat, and steal. One of the things in their podcast they even talked about, even people who reach the top by godly and moral principles, and by through good character, not even politically, but even just to local governments and local, just being promoted in various ways. Even people that reach that by being on time and being a good person and having good stuff. In order to keep your power, it often corrupts. You may get there with morals and principles, but then to hold on to what you got and to stay on top, it's just the natural thing to worry about keeping what you have, exalting your own self, worrying less about others. Once we have that world's power, oftentimes it destroys us. We want power. I want to make myself happy, and we're selfish. And that's Adam and Eve. That's murdering of Abel. That's every thought beyond evil. That's the Tower of Babel. We need help. And Jesus shows up and shows us what true power is. The heartbeat of the whole story is Jesus unifies this whole thing. We've been given God's breath and divine authority and even the Holy Spirit to rule. We are a kingdom of priests. We are kings and priests. And we still have it. And God still wants to work with us and through us to live that way. And so we all have a choice. We're at that new tree. I love that picture. We're at the new tree, the cross, and we can follow the way mankind's been going since Genesis 3, or we can choose this new kingdom route. And I have to put this in here to be honest. There is no promise of you choosing this higher route, this kingdom route. There is no promise of safety in choosing that route, is there? In fact, what are we told? Indeed, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will. So why are we surprised? There is no promise that on this planet, you choosing this higher path, this godlier path, this Jesus path, there is no promise of it all working out and being easy, living this new kingdom way. In fact, the Bible story, think book of Revelation, what happens to all those people? A lot of them. They get martyred for living this way. Almost all of the original apostles die in a pretty barbaric, like Paul's crucified upside down, Paul gets beheaded because he's Roman. Peter's the one they think was crucified upside down. They tried to throw John in a boiling pit of oil, and it didn't work. God protected him, so that's why he gets exiled to Patmos. But most of them died a martyr's death. In the book of Revelation, when the big bad guy comes up out of the sea, whatever the beast is, resist his temptation. If you can give in. You can get a false sense of safety by bowing down to him. Remember Jesus, what Satan offered Jesus? Hey, just bow down to me and you'll be okay. You can do that. You can bow your knee to Caesar. You can bow your knee to the beast, and maybe he won't kill you. But if you resist and you're faithful to God, it angers the beast, and you're probably going to die. But that's how you win. Revelation 2 and verse 10, be faithful unto, and I will give you the crown of life. So even if they kill you, you win. You will be raised and you will be honored. You will be given that white robe and you will be rewarded for your faithfulness, and you will now reign with God forever and dwell around his throne. So when the going gets tough, when things get chaotic, the question is, how are you going to wield power? Turning to self, turning to your own gain. What lengths will you go to feel safe this side of eternity? What lengths will you go to and what behaviors will you adopt in order to maintain some imaginary sense of control and power? I mean, my fellow control freaks that I'm speaking to tonight, is it not an illusion? How fast can that illusion be taken from you? So compare what your behavior is to what Jesus did. One other thing I want to leave you with. Is the Bible about me being saved? Is that the big picture story? Mankind being saved? What do you think? Is it part of it? But is it about us? Is the story about us? Someone open Ephesians 1 and read 3 through 6. Ephesians 1, 3 through 6.
Well, if you're going back to what the man in front of the whiteboard said.
What did he say? I didn't watch the man on the whiteboard, so I have no idea what he said. You people that watch the 40-minute video, what you guys get?
All links to Jesus from the beginning
To the end. That us studying your daughter's suggestion of the genealogy of Jesus is not only is it the genealogy of Jesus, but we see Jesus in every one of these characters. It all points to him. But listen to Ephesians 1, 3 through 6. Rando, you got that? Read that for us.
Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places in Christ. Just as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him in love. He predestined us to adoption. He predestined us to adoption as sons through Jesus Christ to himself, according to the kind intention of his will, to the glory of his grace, which he freely bestowed on us in the beloved.
Verse 6 speaks to the motive of why he did all those blessings in Jesus Christ. He saved us, he adopted us, he rescued us, he loved us. For what reason, verse 6?
To the praise of the glory of his grace.
To the praise of his glory. If you look at, it comes up 3 times in this text, the end of verse 12, to the praise of his glory. The end of verse 14, us being an inheritance and all that, it's to the praise of his glory. The whole narrative is about God's glory. Now, him saving us is a big part of it. Him saving mankind is part of it. But even in God's act of saving us, what is that a testimony to? His grace. And one of the texts I shared, I was texting with Joe about this lesson tonight, this afternoon. What you have, especially why we cannot skip, like a lot of people think we should just, we're New Testament Christians. The reason we need the story of Israel is that is a long history of God showing his long suffering and extending his grace over and over and over again. If we skip from Genesis 3 to Jesus, we miss a lot of history of God working with Adam, man, humankind, and they're failing over and over and over. Brethren, if you were saved, and when you were saved, it'll be to the praise of his glory. And especially verse 6 says, to the praise of the glory of his grace. So why is it important that we see the Bible as one story? The Bible is not just commands. We can't slip into just focusing on the law of Christ because you miss out on this entire big picture worldview of where we came from and why we're here. And it gives meat to the law of Christ of why does Christ trying to call us to live this way? Well, without the whole story, there ain't enough meat on them bones to really understand the why and to see that picture. Another reason why we need to see it as one big story is we need to see our need for grace. And God's constantly offering it over and over and over. That's why the Old Testament is so important. It shows us how God chooses to interact with and provide for his people. And then the last point is so we can see God as the main character. Whose idea is it to send Jesus? Who comes up with that plan? God does. Who is it that creates man? Who is it that saves man over and over and over again? Who is it that lets him go off into captivity and then still out of grace and love lets him come back and brings him home? Has an unfaithful wife is the picture. Has an repeatedly unfaithful wife and travels to the foreign land to bring her home and marry her again. Who's the one behind doing all that? Who's the one who sends Jesus? Who's the one willing to die in our place? And who is the one that is given to us as a gift to dwell within our hearts? God is the main story and character of all of it. And so that's why as we go through these genealogy studies, as we're, in our history here, the Bible classes we have, I think we need to regularly come back to how does this fit into the big picture of it all. So we don't want to miss out on that. All right.
It's a simple thing, Dan, but if you're a visual learner, I've always done that to my Bible.
Yes.
And look at the whole, look at the difference. I mean, if we didn't need all of that.
I think that the podcast I heard today, when that guy was talking about, so we kind of sometimes simplify the scheme of redemption to creation and the fall. How many pages in your Bible contain the creation and the fall? Like 3 or 4. Okay. All right. And then it's all about us being restored. So we skip all this and go to Matthew. And then it restored and we get heaven. So basically Matthew through Revelation and the first 3 pages, I don't want to tear my Bible up, but all right, this is the creation side, these pages, and this is the New Testament. Are we missing a little bit? Are you worried my Bible's going to get ripped? You know what? I've got a bazillion of them, and it's okay. It's written in my heart, man. It's written in my heart. It is. We've got to have that whole picture. Any other thoughts you guys got before we close tonight? Because Grandma gets what Grandma wants. I'm gonna play the song "In Need" because we haven't sung that in a while, and so I've got it with lyrics on the board. Because we don't have it in a book for me to play it that way, so I'm gonna just sing along with that. Are you guys okay with that? Just one song. Anything we want to make mention of before we close tonight? When we finish the song, Mr. Phil, would you mind closing us with a word of prayer? All right. Oh man, did it cancel out? Oh, I had it preloaded for you, Mr. Jim. Maybe it's still there. In need of love, in need of mercy raining down from high above, in need of sin, in need of peace, in need of things that only you can give to me, in need of the perfect Lamb, my refuge, the great I am. This is my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am in need of grace. In need of love, in need of mercy raining down from high above, in need of strength, in need of peace, in need of things that only you can give to me, in need of the perfect Lamb, my refuge strong, the great I am. This is my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am in need. In need of Christ, the perfect Lamb, my refuge strong, the great I am. This is my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am in need. I am your child, I am in need. All right, Mr. Phil, if you don't mind closing us with a word of prayer.
Our most gracious and compassionate Heavenly Father, I don't know if I can say it very any better than what that song says, but we're thankful that you loved us so that you sent your Son to be our Savior in heaven, and we promise that eternal life with you. Father, we know that it's important that we discuss here tonight. We read the entire Bible, learn from it, and go closer to you through the Scripture. Father, we go our separate ways. Let us always be thankful for your love, grace, and mercy, and that it will show in our everyday lives towards others. And thank you for thank you for the blessing of us being privileged and blessed by your word. In Jesus' name, amen.
One announcement I did forget. This is the 5th Sunday, this coming Sunday. I know some folks are going to be out of town. That was the idea that Bill had about us going and visiting some folks that aren't able to come. I texted him today and just kind of asked him what his vision of what that was going to look like was. And kind of what we talked about was maybe meeting up around 4 o'clock-ish here. I know Oscar and Barbara was like one of the first ones that he kind of wanted to see. And then he talked about, depending on people's comfort or interest, maybe we could go do some visiting and then maybe go eat together. We can talk about that, the ones that are able to do that Sunday. I've got a couple people in mind that we can, depending on what our plan is, if we want to. He even talked about going and seeing them and then going to Steenhatchee to eat if people wanted to do that, but that's a long ways for others. So if we wanted to come back to town, or people may not want to do that at all. So based on their comfort level, but we are going to try to do that visiting. So I'm going to say Sunday at 4, we'll meet up and gather here and then go see those folks. We won't stay long. We're not going to go inside, similar to what we've done in the past. We're not going to invade. We're just going to kind of maybe sing a couple songs, spread out and say a prayer, even just to say hi and let them know we love them kind of thing. But we're going to try to do that this coming Sunday, those that are able and interested in doing that. I know y'all are going to be on. But we're going to do it regular. I think he said he wants to do 5th Wednesdays and 5th Sundays to give us even some other opportunities. So plan on that.